This is chapters 136 to 140 of 14 Ways to Die. 136. I try to keep track of time, but it's impossible. It feels like we've been in here for hours. Finally, I hear a car door open, the jangle of keys, and the trunk springs up. It takes a while for my eyes to get used to the moonlight, and when I recognize where we are, I start to retch, and Mr. Farrell pulls a gag from my mouth just as I throw up. When I look up at him, he smiles, and I notice he's head to toe in black, with only his face visible. I look at his hands and wonder if those were the gloves he used to strangle my mother. He doesn't say anything, just waits for me to take a few deep breaths and pulls me forward. I know exactly where we are going, and he doesn't disappoint. Mr. Farrell keeps pushing us along until we reach my mother's gravestone. Only then, when he forces us to the muddy ground, does he say, "Surprise." 137. Are you impressed? The magpie man says. I don't know where they all are, but she was special. I want to smack his face in. I want to kill him right here where we buried my mom. Jamie is breathing fast, and I look at him, telling him to settle down with my eyes. The magpie man stares at him and says, "Calm down, little man," but that only makes him worse. He unzips a bag and pulls out a kitchen knife, the biggest in those 5-set collections that sits in blocks of wood on the countertop, the one you only use on special occasions. When Jamie sees it, he starts making whimpering noises through the cloth, and I guess this is it. The magpie man is going to murder me next to my mother's grave. So what harm is there in talking to him if he hasn't already decided my fate? This is your big plan, I say. You're going to kill us here? They'll find you, you know. He laughs so loud it echoes in the darkness and says, "I'm not going to kill you, Jessica. You are going to kill each other." What? Well, technically I'm going to force you to kill each other, but they won't know the difference. You are sick. Maybe, but I'm also smarter than you. If you and your boyfriend make a suicide pact, if you slit your wrist by your mother's graveside, that's not suspicious. It's just sad. I won't hurt him. The magpie man smiles and says, "We'll see about that." This won't work, I say. The police will figure it out. They didn't last time. He pushes me onto my front and cuts through the rope, holding his hands behind my back. Rolling me over, he leans down and stares into my face until I have to look away. "You look just like her," he says. "Fuck you." "No, Jessica, fuck you. You thought you could catch me, but I'm always one step ahead. Did you really think that dressing up like your mother or standing in that alley was going to be enough? Did you really think I would come? I kill when I want to. You don't choose. I do." His smile makes my skin crawl, but I need to focus on the phone he doesn't know I have, the hands he has freed, the space into which I will run if I have the thinnest chance. "I liked your t-shirt," he says. "Did you like mine?" I imagine the picture of his last victim with her fate carved below her number. "You're sick," I say again. He smiles. "You made me more creative. Why did you kill my mother?" For a moment, I don't think he's going to answer, but then he sighs and says, "I've been watching your show, Jessica. You know that? How could I not? You're a strong girl. I like to think I'm the reason." I take a deep breath to stop myself from spitting in his face. Then he stands and walks over to Mom's gravestone and touches the words. "I killed her because I had to." I stare at his face, trying to match it with the hidden image Mom took the day she died. Is he the man in the photographs? Was his blurry image sitting unseen in a forgotten camera all this time? "She changed everything," he says. I could run now, but I need to know. I need to hear what only he can tell me. "You were there all along," I say. "You weren't a monster. You were a fucking neighbor." The magpie man smiles and says, "I was both. When I was 7, when my whole world fell apart and my dad chose to live in the wreckage, I didn't pay much attention to the man who replaced Bernie's dad. Even before, he was just a shape, just a noise next door, another stranger in a world full of them." "Why?" "She saw," he says. "I had no choice." I glance at Jamie, his tears soaking the bag in his mouth. She was taking photos, snooping on me. She hated me living next door, in his house, moving in with her friend, but she picked the wrong day to spy. I think of the 4 blurry images, the mixture of colors that has now seeped into my dreams. What did she see? The look on his face chills me. She saw what I was burning. I don't think she did. I think she was trying to, but whatever it was, she couldn't get it clear enough. She tried, she failed, and he killed her anyway. "I should thank you," he says. "It seems right that we end it here, back where it started." I don't understand what he's talking about, and then suddenly I do. "What did you mean when you said this worked last time?" The magpie man smiles and says, "I think you know. The suicide in the cemetery on the day before Mom died wasn't suicide. It was murder." you'd killed before, I say. He crouches down next to me and says, "It wasn't the same. I felt nothing, and there was so much blood, I had to burn my clothes." The reds and yellows and greens. The backyard fire Mom was trying to stare into. He saw her watching, he took her photo, and that night he took her life. She didn't see anything, I say. It was blurry. She didn't know what she was looking at. He looks confused and says, "I got rid of her phone. It wasn't on her phone. It was a camera." For the first time, the Magpie Man looks genuinely scared, and as he turns away, I seize my chance. I stand and run, and for a few seconds there's no sound except my breathing and my feet against the ground. Then he's shouting, and I start weaving between the gravestones, running as fast as I can. Not stopping, I reach into my bra and pull out Dad's phone and dial 999. I hear the Magpie Man behind me, his own heavy breathing ripping through the darkness, and I dart to my right and start moving slower, trying not to make a sound. 999, what's your emergency? I hear him stop, the crunch of the leaves on the ground slow and deliberate, as if he heard the operator speaking into my ear. If I reply, he will hear me, and I won't have time to tell them where I am, let alone why. The woman starts to repeat herself, so I hang up, feeling my way between the stones, praying that I'm moving away from him with each careful step. What do you expect to happen, Jessica?" he calls. "I will find you." I hear him walking toward me, too slowly to know exactly where I am. I stick to the shadows, terrified the moonlight will give me away. Every sound feels louder in the darkness, each snap of a twig like thunder in my ringing ears. His footsteps crack against the uncut grass, and I freeze. My fists balled up so tight my fingernails dig into the skin. The pain focuses me, and I close my eyes, listening for his movements, figuring out exactly which part of the darkness he's coming from. I'm too scared to breathe deeply. Instead, my breath comes out, small and jagged, my chest growing tighter until I'm sure I'll explode. He isn't calling anymore. He's listening as closely as I am. He's hunting me. I hold my breath, ready to fight, until the noises fade slightly. He's walking away from me. This is my only chance, so I push a different number, hearing it ring once, twice, 3 times, then I hang up. I call again and count 1, 2, then stop. And then again, 3 rings this time, the end of a pattern I pray Dad remembers. And then I call for a 4th time, and before the first ring has even finished, he whispers, "Jessica, what's wrong?" "Mom's grave," I whisper. "He's here. Help me." Before Dad can reply, I hang up and throw the phone into the darkness, and it can't be more than 5 seconds before the crack behind me is too close to be anything except the Magpie Man. "Found you," he says. 138. I swing around and hit him as hard as I can in the face, and as he steps back, I run. I'm praying Dad will come, but I need to give him enough time. With no traffic, with no red lights, he could be here in less than 10 minutes, and I use that as my motivation to run faster, dodging between the gravestones, fighting against my beating heart and my aching legs. I hear him behind me. I feel him reach out and touch my shoulder, just as I find another gear and slip out of his grasp. I turn quickly to my right and run deeper into a cemetery that stretches farther than I ever imagined. I want to look back, but that's the first mistake they make in movies. You look back and you fall and you're caught. I keep my eyes forward, trying to make out every obstacle a few seconds before I have to dodge it. The second mistake is that people always run in a straight line, so I weave through the gravestones, then turn sharply to my left and go harder and faster than before. My heart's pounding, but I keep going. The third mistake is stopping, thinking you've outrun them, believing they aren't as desperate to kill you as you are to survive. Once you hide, it's only a matter of time before you're found. So I run until my legs burn, and then I keep running. Except there's one thing I don't see until it's too late: the metal railings forming a border around the cemetery, keeping people out and in. I'm about as far away from the only entrance as I can get, and if Dad does come, I'll be dead long before he finds me. I touch the railing for a moment, trying to take in a few deep breaths as quietly as I can. It's darkest in the corners, but there's no way out. I focus on the silence and the cold tickling my fingers while my body burns with adrenaline. And then I start running around the edge of the cemetery, where there are no stones blocking my way, just a clear path back to the gate. My legs are on fire, my heart hammers in my head, but I don't stop. I see the entrance ahead and feel a surge of hope. I'll get help and save Jamie and catch the Magpie Man. I see everything fall into place. And that's when I hear him behind me. He's getting closer with every step, and this time when he reaches out, he grabs my shoulder and pulls me back, and I have no energy left to fight. He pushes me to the ground, then leans over with his hands on his knees, panting. I could try to run again, but maybe I don't have to, because Mom's grave is not far from Dad's only way in. I could piss him off so much that he kills me right here, or I could submit just long enough for a savior to arrive. He waits until his breath has slowed, then grins and says, I like a challenge. I clench my fist and go for him, but he knocks them away and forces them to my sides. Enough, he snarls. Then he pulls me back to Jamie, who looks dazed like he's just come to. The magpie man sits us next to each other and pushes the knife into my hand. Here's what's going to happen, he says. I'm going to make you slit his wrist, and then very quickly, I'm going to make him slit yours. And when the police find you, it will look like you snapped and went to join your mother. That's how they'll remember you, Jessica, as a weakling who couldn't handle it when your little show didn't work and ended it in the most terrible way. There's that grin again, the evil dripping off him. How did he go so long without being found out? How can he be two such different people at the same time? But maybe he isn't. Maybe Bernie knows how bad he can be, and that's why she did what she did. Maybe Clara finally thought enough was enough. How can you do this to your daughters, I say. He looks angry and says, I only have one daughter. Bernie tried to kill herself because of you. You have no idea, the magpie man says, and I'm hoping he's about to explain, because the longer he talks, the more chance Dad has of finding us. Have you hurt her? I ask, and he doesn't reply, forcing my fingers around the handle of the knife. What will Jamie's parents think? Will they believe the lie the magpie man leaves for them, or will they see the truth below? I try to let go of the knife, but he wraps his hands tightly around mine and moves my arm toward Jamie. With his other hand, he grips Jamie's wrist and holds it out, then forces my hand down toward his skin until the blade is resting there. I'm sorry it had to end this way, the magpie man says. It was never my intention to hurt children. I can't help but laugh, even here, even now, and he tilts his head and says, What's so funny? It was never your intention to hurt children. You murdered their mothers, and you know what you do, and I know what you do to Bernie. I saw her bedroom door. He doesn't respond to that. He nods and grips my hand even tighter, then pushes until the knife breaks Jamie's skin directly over the rope burn. I try to fight back, to pull the knife up as he's forcing it down, but he's stronger than me, and I see the blood start creeping out. I look at Jamie, his eyes wider than I've ever seen them, his face white in the moonlight, and I hate myself. He deserves so much better than this. He only ever wanted to be my hero, and he is. I pull back more, refusing to do this, fighting against the magpie man's grip, even as Jamie's cry escapes from behind the claw still stuffed in his mouth. That's when we hear the noise. Feet pounding toward us, the shape arriving so quickly I can't believe my eyes. It smashes into the magpie man and knocks him backward, the knife falling to the ground, and my first instinct is to pull the cloth from Jamie's mouth and wrap it around his wrist. Only then do I turn and see my father on top of the magpie man, beating his fist on his chest. He came. He actually came. The man who gave up, the man who barely leaves the living room, he caught the monster. But the magpie man rolls away, leaps up, and punches my dad between the eyes. Then he grabs the knife and lunges forward just as Dad jumps back, the blade slashing the air between them. Blood trickles from Dad's nose, but his eyes are locked on the magpie man. He sways slowly from side to side with his arms out, while the magpie man wipes his own blood from his lips, smearing it across his cheek. He sneers and says, You can't beat me. I'll kill you just like I killed your wife. I see something crackle under Dad's surface, but he doesn't move. He waits, watching the knife and the monster holding it. Come on, the magpie man snarls. But Dad doesn't respond. He waits until the knife moves again, then spins to the left, steps forward, and punches him in the side of the head. Then again until the magpie man's legs give way and he falls. Then Dad is pinning him to the ground, punching him over and over again, taking out 10 years of anger on the only person who deserves it. He looks so big, towering over the man who ruined his life, and I see who he was before Mom died. Are you okay? Jamie says, and I nod, even though I can feel tears streaming down my face. I should be asking him that, and I touch the cloth covering his broken skin, and I say, I'm sorry. It isn't your fault. It is. Jamie is only here because of me. But if that was my fault, then so is this. So is my dad. Tilting his head back, taking deep breaths into the sky as the magpie man lies beaten on the ground, his face bloody, his eyes closed. I stand up and touch Dad on the shoulder. That's enough. 1:39. The sirens drift through the night air, growing louder until they shatter the silence of the cemetery as flashing red and blue lights repaint the scene. Elliot Farrell is handcuffed and pushed into the back of a police car. I pictured this moment so many times, but it doesn't feel like I'd imagined. I don't feel elation. We don't celebrate. We just watch as the man who killed my mother is driven away, his eyes focusing on us until we're out of sight. I used to have nightmares about those eyes. Before I know who before I knew who they belonged to. Now I hope he has nightmares about mine. While Jamie is taken to the hospital, Dad and I sit by Mom's grave watching detectives unwind yellow tape, slowly barricading us in. Dad stares at me, a look on his face I've never seen before. It's a mixture of anger and fear and hatred and sorrow and everything in between. Thank you, I tell him. I wasn't sure you'd remember the code. Of course I did, Dad says. You should be proud of yourself. The show worked. The smallest hint of a smile flickers across his face before he says, I was paying more attention than you thought. I always have. I don't visit Mom's grave enough. Nan does. She comes once a week removing the dead flowers and replacing them with whatever's in season. This week they are bright pink gerbas to keep Mom company. We should come here more often, I say. We should, Dad replies. I wonder if this is the change I've been so desperate for, if catching the magpie man will bring my old father back. The early signs are good. 1:40. It's not until we're home that I remember the receipt. I pull it out of my sock and stare at it, wondering what could have happened if the magpie man's plan had worked and they'd found it when I was dead. Would they have realized, or would they have thrown it away without a second look? It doesn't matter now, but it's nice to think I might have got one over the magpie man from beyond the grave. Lorraine doesn't answer when I call the number on her card, so I leave a message telling her I have one last piece of evidence for her to collect. Nan comes over that night and holds me tight, and it's not until I try to end the hug that I realize she's crying. For 10 years she kept us together, and now finally she can break down. Thank you, she whispers. She would have been so proud of you. This time I know this isn't Nan's way of saying she's proud of me. I know it's true. Oh, sorry. I don't say anything back. I hold her extra tight and wait for her to let go. Later that night, the three of us sit in the living room, mostly silent, mostly happy. I would be lying if I said catching him made everything all right. In a strange, cruel way, I feel sadder when I think of Mom. The terrible certainty of never seeing her again is more powerful than the satisfaction of getting justice. But now we can grieve, and I am happy too. I'm happy that he will never kill again, that Lord Banks's baby boy will grow up knowing her murderer rotted in jail. I'm happy that somehow this ridiculous idea of mine actually worked. The biggest moment of the show happened when no one was watching, but that's life, I guess. Most of our defining moments take place when no one's paying attention. I didn't know I was having my last conversation with Mom when she kissed me goodbye the day she was murdered. She didn't know those photographs would rob her of a happy ending. Dad didn't know he would lose his soulmate on a random Friday, and Elliot Farrell didn't know he would be caught because of a secret second phone and an emergency ring I never thought I would use.